Hello and welcome. I'm David Robinson, the online editor at The Banker, and today we're going to look at how to run a better bank, the cover story in the March issue of The Banker. With me to discuss this is Silvia Pavoni, the economics editor. Silvia, the last year has obviously been tumultuous for many industries because of the pandemic, but the COVID crisis has also driven big changes. How much has the pandemic accelerated changes that were already underway in the banking industry?
Hello, David. Thanks. So we clearly have seen quite a big push, particularly when it comes to the use of digital platforms. That's the most obvious one, and not just in banking. But there is also something else that has happened and has really gained traction and perhaps even momentum, dare I say. And that's the discourse around sustainability and environmental and social and governance principles. So the pain and struggles of last year really have reinvigorated these kind of talks. Corporate social responsibility is nothing new. We have had CSR becoming part of the corporate alphabet many years ago. But certainly what has happened last year has given new life to these kind of discussions. And these kind of stuff really has practical implications. So we're not just talking about principles. So just to give you an example, something that we talked about in the article is that in February, the board of JP Morgan, faced with a suggestion by and supported by an activist investor, turned down a proposal to change its legal status. And that proposal would have had JP Morgan's legal status turn into a public benefit corporation. Why is it relevant? Because these are for-profit legal entities that must include specific public benefits in their statements of purpose. And it's particularly striking that JP Morgan turned it down because it is also understandable, because of course that would have implied going through a massive bureaucratic change at the bank. But the reason for turning this proposal down is that the board decided that in case of conflicting interests with other stakeholders, the bank's fiduciary duty really is to further shareholders' interest. The boss of JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, is also the chairman of the Business Roundtable, which is a US association of chief executives of major US corporations. And earlier in 2019, so even before the crisis, 181 chief executives supported the proposal by the Business Roundtable to broaden the definition of corporate purpose to include the interests of customers, employees, and other stakeholders. So essentially, we looked into how on earth do you actually manage to turn into practice, turn into action, all these very valuable and understandable calls to actually improve and change the way that we look at corporations and their role in society.
Oh, really interesting. I suppose it begs the question, are existing governance structures up to the job?
And that's exactly the question that, again, activist investors, but others are posing. And so there are some practical solutions, and there are also some very, very real problems. Again, this isn't just a philosophical point. We at the bank, we have reported previously about, for example, a survey that's an international survey that the European Risk Management Council run, in which show climate change and the breakup of social cohesion as the risks that the financial sector is least prepared for. So again, this has practical implications, now being able to manage and deal with those kind of risks. But also more broadly, when we talk about social cohesion, there is a bit of a vicious cycle, isn't there, between social unrest and financial exclusion, because of course the latter arguably feeds the former. Mm. And also previously we did report that, for example, again in the US, between 2010 and 2018, we saw branch closures disproportionately affecting poorer neighborhoods and neighborhoods that were majority Black or Hispanic. And this is based on a study by S&P Global Market Intelligence. And, the pandemic clearly has exposed these tensions even further, because, again, we saw data by the Federal Reserve that showed that less than a fifth of Black entrepreneurs who qualified for the US government's small business COVID-19 relief program, the Paycheck Protection Program, only a fifth of them succeeded in securing loans. So this is, again, a very, very much a real issue. How do we go about it? Now, one practical solution that some have suggested is the creation of a role that does sit at the board and that is going to be in charge of the company, the bank's implementation of their sustainability policy. So there was a research by a report by Deloitte, supported by the Institute of International Finance, recently released, which suggested the creation of the Chief Sustainability Officer, again, sitting on the board. It may sound like perhaps a given, or maybe something that may not have too strong a relevance, but we do remember that from the in the aftermath of the financial crisis, there was certainly a sort of an elevation of the chief risk officer that previously was not always having a seat at the big boys table. And that role changed, and that person became much more empowered to actually say no to certain decisions and gain a relevance and status within the company. So again, Deloitte does point out that just as in a bank, everyone pretty much really manages risk, there is still the need to have a chief risk officer. In the same way, sustainability really should come into any kind of decisions and discussions that take place within a financial institution. At the same time, we probably do need a figure that heads this kind of efforts and translates it into action and into practical structures within the bank. And then, of course, governance is perhaps one of those things that DG in ESG is one of those things that we kind of assume we know what it is about, but it escapes definition almost. Although without the right governance structures, you find it really, really hard to implement the E and the S in ESG, so the environmental and social aspects.
Well, Silvia, thank you. It'll be interesting to see how these better and more innovative solutions play out in the next few years.
Thank you, David.